Welcome to the Polymer Science Podcast. I am Dr. Alicia Blatis.
And I'm Jacob Shackman.
In this podcast, we'll be speaking to researchers from around the world and talk to them about how their work is improving our daily lives. I hope you enjoy our conversation and that you learn something new.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Polymer Science Podcast. My name is Jacob Shackman, and today I'm here live and in person with Dr. Boran Ma. Dr. Boran? Boran? Boran.
Boran.
Boran. Dr.
Yep.
Boran Ma.
Mm-hmm.
She makes me call her Dr. Bo. I tried Dr. Ma, but she's too cool for that. Thanks for being here, Dr. Bo. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Bo came to us after her postdoctoral work at Duke University. Who were you working there?
I was working with Professor Kate Brinson.
Kate Brinson. Okay. And how did you end up here at USM?
Well, it's a bit of a funny story, actually. I wasn't really looking for a job at that point, but I heard from my friend about this opening, and at that point, I already had pretty much of everything in my application package ready. So I was like, I'll give it a try. Why not? And I came here for the interviews, and I ended up really liking it here. And after some really difficult decision-making process, I finally decided to come here and start my independent career.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so let's rewind it a bit. How did you end up finding polymers as a study of any kind?
Wow, that's a really good question, Jacob. I also a little bit random. So when I was in my undergrad, I was mostly working on experiments on metal matrix composites and alloy materials. And in my senior year in college, I wanted to just like play around a little bit with different materials. And at that point, we had the research lab I worked in. We had a project related to sound sorption applications. And I was doing some literature review, and I found that people use a lot of polymer materials for that sort of applications. And I started looking into polyurethane used as like a coating material with sound sorption applications.
Mm-hmm. And so this was a hands-on type research, or were you already doing computational studies?
No, it was all hands-on, and I was mostly just quote unquote playing around with it, and just like to see wherever it goes.
The best types of research.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Awesome. And so then you finished your undergraduate degree. Tell us a little bit about your PhD experience. Where did you go to school there, and what did you study?
Yeah. So actually, when I was doing my senior year project, I realized that it would have been nice if I could have done some simulation actually to look into how, because I was working at basically working on this polyurethane based polymer composites with some reinforcements where we use the so-called fly ash as the nanofillers in it. And I thought, you know what, it would be nice if we could run some simulations and to calculate how the loadings and the dispersion of the nanofillers would affect the sound absorption property of these materials, right? But at that point, I wasn't really capable of doing anything like that. But that was also what made me realize that it would be really helpful if we could use some modeling and simulation techniques to gain some more understanding of a certain material system you're looking into.
Mm-hmm.
And also, during my undergraduate time, I was able to do a summer internship. It's sort of like REU that we have here. I was doing one of those at University of Waterloo in Canada. And the professor there who was hosting me, he's someone who mainly does computational work, but his lab, some students in his lab also worked on experiments. That's where I learned, wow, you can do both, and you can get so much insights from simulation and modeling. So when I started my PhD program at Northwestern University, I was in the process of choosing PhD advisors and which research group I want to join. I just specifically looked for people who worked on modeling and simulations. And I talked to some professors and ended up joining my PhD advisors group, Professor Monica Vera.
Did you have any, let me think about how to ask this. Did you know anything about computational studies? What's the right way to say it? I keep wanting to say computational chemistry. You've corrected me on that once before. Then we can say simulations. There's modeling. So before I ask that next question, what is the difference between between the terminology here?
I guess overall you can use computational research as the umbrella term, because when you say computational chemistry, that limits you to the chemistry field. Then, all the modeling and simulation, there's a lot of physics in it as well. Yeah, so I guess computational research would be a good term for that.
Okay, so then back to the original question I wanted to ask. What did you know about computational research at the time that you decided, I think I would like to do this more?
Honestly, I didn't know much about it. I mean, I knew of it. I knew the concept, and it sounded really cool to me. But I had no idea how much learning it would take for someone to really get up to speed or get to a level where you're comfortable with running your own simulations, developing your own models and whatnot. I didn't really have a whole lot of idea.
What's that learning curve like, right? What were the first couple of steps that you had to take to jump the curve and say to yourself, okay, I can do this. Now let me get my PhD in this.
Well, the learning curve was very steep. I mean, just like really anything else, at the beginning, it's always a steep learning curve. But it's also really rewarding, right? Because you're learning something new, and just that excitement, seeing yourself grow more and more every day. That's a great feeling. So the way I started off was because I knew that programming is a pretty big part in modeling and simulation, this computational research work. So, and in college, I took a course on C++ in my sophomore year, and I didn't really do much with it ever since. So when I first started grad school, I just had to sort of teach myself some basic programming language a little bit. And I started with Python, which is actually a great language for beginners to learn. It's very intuitive, not super hard to learn. And once I got quite comfortable with Python, I started also just getting into learning about what molecular modeling is all about. That's what I knew at the point that that's what I'm going to need for my graduate work, for my PhD study.
So that's the type of work you did for your PhD studies, and that's what you're going to be doing now also, is computational modeling in materials science. Is that how you put it?
Yeah.
Can we get a few examples of the ideas that you brought, say, during your interview, and the directions that you're going to take with your lab now?
Okay, so I feel like to answer this, I'll have to give you a little bit of information on what I did for my postdoc work as well.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, so after I graduated from Northwestern, I went to Duke University and started working with Professor Kate Brinson, and at the point I wanted to expand my toolbox a little bit after my PhD. So I wanted to learn about some new modeling techniques, which is something I didn't do during my PhD time. So I started learning finite element analysis during my postdoc work, and also got into a little bit data-driven meta-analysis of polymer materials.
What is the difference between finite element analysis and meta-analysis? Is that what the other one was?
Data-driven meta-analysis.
Data-driven meta-analysis.
Yeah. So
what's that mean?
So finite element analysis is basically comparing to molecular modeling that I did in my PhD time is a different modeling technique that looks at slightly different length scale of your system, And data-driven meta-analysis is more like machine learning aided research that you can basically look at different length scales. So it's essentially a different technique. So for me, it was more like learning more skills. So I'll have the capability of doing like a range of things once I start my independent research career. So with all those skills that I was able to learn for my future research, for my research lab, I would love to apply these modeling techniques into applications like energy and sustainability. Those are just something that I've always been passionate about, and I think it would be really nice to be able to apply what we've learned throughout along the way to the issues that we care about. Yeah.
Is there a way that you can elaborate on that someone is already sort of using computational modeling to address issues in the energy sector or green energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, you can use molecular modeling to look at, say, the electrolyte materials for your ion batteries, or use molecular modeling to study fuel cell membranes.
Mm-hmm. And what are they looking at? Say when we're studying these ion batteries or the fuel cell membranes, let's go with the fuel cell membrane because I like membrane materials.
Yeah.
What would we be investigating in this fuel cell simulation?
Yeah. So with molecular modeling, you would be looking at the molecular level details of your material. So, for example, for fuel cell applications, you would focus a lot on like the transport properties of your material, right? And the molecular modeling technique just gives you that capability of
what information needs to be provided to the computer to model something like that.
So it depends on what materials you're studying. I try to think of it the way as just like synthesis in a lab, in a wet lab, right? You're basically synthesizing some polymer materials on your computer first, and you tell your computer, you tell your model what kind of chemical structures, depending on what kind of details you can go into. Sometimes with like atomistic level simulation, you can model, you can put each individual atom into your model. And sometimes if you want to save some computing time to look at more polymer chains, you would go to a more coarse-grained model where you would basically group some atoms, sometimes even some monomers, into one bead in your simulation. That's the coarse-grained beads.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you get to look at relatively longer polymer chains and relatively larger number of chains in your simulation. But by doing that, comparing to the atomistic models, you lose a little bit of the atomistic detail of your polymers.
So this is, I'm in my head, I'm equating it to like a quick print versus high quality print.
Yeah, you can think of it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so now we've synthesized our molecules or polymers on our computer. So we've got the simulation model going on, and then we tell the computer how each of those atom or bead would interact with each other. What's the potential energy going on? Because we can easily think of like different, there's going to be different interaction between different atoms, right? Like the interaction between a carbon atom and an oxygen atom is going to be different from the interaction between a carbon and carbon atom.
Mm-hmm.
So we tell all of those information to the computer, and with molecular dynamics simulations, it'll basically predict where those atoms, those beads would go. So it's like a quote unquote evolution of your atoms or beads.
Sure. Yeah. The evolution of their movement and interactions.
Exactly.
I mean, again, going back to the question of what information do we give to the computer? And that also, and you've mentioned it sort of depends on the material, what atoms are involved, what chemical interactions might be happening. What are we using? What software are we using on the computer that already knows some subset of information that, like, I don't know the bonding energy of a typical hydrogen bond. How do I put my polymer into this software and have it account for those types of intermolecular interactions already?
Yeah. So especially for molecular dynamics simulations, there are a lot of free and open source softwares available. For example, there's LAMMPS, GROMACS, HumDBlue, just to name a few. And each of these softwares, they have very well maintained documentation on their websites, and you can look it up and learn about the syntax from their websites, just which will tell you how you can run your simulations with their software.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interactions we just talked about between the atoms and beads and whatnot, and also like the bond potential. Sometimes so there's angle potential, dihedral potential, depending on how much of the detail you want to apply in your model, right? And so those information. So it's basically those are what we call like force field in our MD simulations, molecular dynamics simulations, and all of those softwares give you options to set those force field parameters.
You know, I'm realizing that I'm asking a lot of questions that I've asked the other grad students for this episode. So I mentioned to Dr. Bo that I went around our department to speak with other graduate students about computational modeling and research. Specifically, I asked, what do they know already? What would they like to know? And how do they think computational modeling and research can be useful to their own graduate studies? So here's what some of these students had to say regarding what they already know.
Just that it exists. My only exposure to it was when we were at APS and we were like seeing a bunch of computational presentations. That's about it.
Specific to materials science and engineering, I'm actually not too familiar with it.
Not a lot. I know that it happens. That's about it.
Honestly, not a ton. We've done a good bit of modeling and research in the group historically, but I know it's a very valuable tool and can kind of bolster a lot of our experimental findings.
The folks you just heard from now were Sarah Valdez, Evan Stacy, Dr. Dana Pinson, congrats Dana, and Levi Hammernick, in that order. Thank you folks so much for being a part of this episode. Now back to the show. Based on the question of what do you know, and the answers that you've heard, what is your just first reaction to having heard those answers?
Yeah, I think I was not surprised by the responses that we got from some of our students, because if you just look at the research community, specifically polymer science research community, there are just so many more experimental researchers than computational researchers. And if you look at the work being published out there, there's also just more experimental work than those on computational work. So I'm not surprised that people might not be super familiar with what it really is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the next question was what would you like to know about computational modeling and research? And this is what they had to say.
I guess what kind of programs they use to code everything, and I have no idea what kind of softwares they use. Yeah, how do they actually do the research?
Starting from the ground up, I'm interested to see what the specific parameters you would look at in analyzing a data set for whether the X application, what would you need to plug in there? Because honestly, I'm not familiar with it at all. I don't even know what they're looking at.
More about how it's done, I have no idea how much computer knowledge you need to have. And then more about the assumptions that go into making the data.
This is something I've been thinking about for a while now. My work's in dynamic chemistry, is understanding dynamic covalent bond exchange. So I think computational stuff is a really interesting space for kind of teasing out collision frequency and the kinetics of some of these dynamic exchanges.
Okay, so first reactions to this second set of answers.
Yeah. So the second question to them
What
was,
would you like to
what would
know?
you like to know? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was first reaction. I was definitely very encouraged to hear the answers because our students are very, interested in learning more about just computational research in general.
Or have you been under the impression that people are not very interested?
No, not at all. I mean, I think my impression so far has been mostly from like my interaction with first year students, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are definitely interested. Some of them are a little bit intimidated by it because it's it's a new skill for them. So it's like there's this like a lot of uncertainty. There's the learning curve that we've talked about earlier. So it could be a little scary at first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it sounded like the students that you've interviewed, some of them even already had a little bit of learning or a little bit like experience with it.
Yeah, definitely. I talked to more students than we heard just now. The people I don't like, I just cut them right out.
Yeah,
of course.
Of course.
But no, it seemed like everyone I spoke with, regardless of how much experience we had, there was no one I spoke with that is a computational researcher. So it was all very limited knowledge, but there were a lot of similar questions regarding what they would like to know. Like we talked about, someone was wondering, about the software that gets involved, and we talked about that earlier, and just not knowing where do I start. I was speaking with Mustafa Zago in Dr. Nazarenko's group, and that was his question. He's like, I have no idea where I would even start. So let's go with that, right? If I wanted to open up YouTube or open a book tomorrow, what book am I going to read, or what website should I go find to start learning Python? Maybe, right? Is learning Python or a relevant language the proper first step? What would you say to someone to start with here?
Yeah, of course. I would say for someone who has, let's say, zero programming background, I would suggest start with learning a little bit of Python first, just to get comfortable with that way of thinking. And then they can move on to learning more about molecular modeling in general. And there's this book called Understanding Molecular Simulation, From Algorithms to Applications by Frankel and Schmidt. And it's one of my favorite books on this topic. And from this book, you can learn just some like basic concepts underlying. And then I would suggest look into some of the free and open source softwares that we talked about, LAMMPS, GirlMax, HomeDBlue, and just start with their the examples they have in their documentation pages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these softwares are very good at giving you examples, and it's a really good learning approach, just learning by doing, right?
Yeah.
Following those examples, and then after understanding those examples, you can do some tweaks to it, and then you can apply the same thing to whatever material system you're interested in looking at.
Okay. The final question I asked the grad students was, how can computational modeling and research help you with your own projects in grad school?
For mine, it would be interesting because specifically we're trying to understand behaviors of polymers on a single molecule level, and being able to compare simulation to what we're actually observing would help to prove that what we're doing could be working.
Specifically, there is a ton of AI machine learning models that you can apply that gauges ligand binding to extracellular surface receptors.
I think it could be really helpful, especially like in the scouting phases where I'm just trying to figure out how to design my research to kind of point me in directions like that.
Yeah, I think, kind of just understanding there's a big misconception about, chain dynamics versus activation energy of these bond exchanges. So getting these materials to collide and kind of actually being able to visualize this for these bond exchanges would be really interesting.
Okay, so do those sound like reasonable computational studies from of course the limited information provided, but at the surface level, are those normal goals to try and reach?
Yeah, absolutely. because from molecular dynamics simulations, we can get structure-property relationship. For example, like how some of the composition in your polymer materials would affect the properties of those polymer materials.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could be mechanical properties, could be glass transition temperature, could be like we mentioned before, some transport properties, which depends on whatever applications you're interested in, right? And that'll all be affected if you change, say, some volume fraction, if you change the chemical structure of some functional group, if you change, like if there's any like external field you're applying to, that'll all affect the property. And we can get those answers from molecular modeling. And yeah, and AI, machine learning, these are like really not new anymore, but recent years, a lot of researchers started incorporating machine learning and AI techniques into their research, where you can basically train some machine learning models to find the correlation between different variables. And yeah, these are all just some very powerful tools.
When we talk about using machine learning, what do I have to teach a machine how to learn to use that? Or is there somewhere where I submit information to some cluster of servers where this learning machine exists?
So the majority of the research going on in the material science field, we're mostly looking at existing machine learning models. So those are like developed by computer scientists who know a whole lot more about algorithm than material scientists in general. Very few of the I mean, some research still in the material science field are probably focused more on like getting better algorithm for their own research. But a lot of them, you already have these existing tools that you can apply to your own research. So it's the same as like taking advantage of those free and open source softwares to do your molecular simulations. You already have a lot of tools available to you that you can use and apply to your own research.
So I have a question that is both is really to have another specific example of where to start and what parameters, but it's also selfish because it would help me in my own research.
Yeah.
I need to determine through simulation the glass transition temperature of a polymer network. And I know everything that's going to be in that network and the general connectivity that it's going to have. And I know what finite changes I would like to make. Where do I start again when it comes to trying to simulate an answer for this TG determination, right? So then I guess I'll try and answer myself and you help me fill in the gaps essentially based on what we've talked about, right? So I suppose my first step might be to go find one of these open source softwares, teach myself how to use it given its examples and whatnot. And let's say then I understand at this point the software interface. What is this going to be asking me to input so that it can tell me a glass transition temperature? And as far as the way I understand it, apparently I need to look at thermal expansion at different temperatures of the network that I put into the computer. This all tracks?
Yeah. I'm trying to really just pull up this paper that could help you. But are we gonna put this in the podcast as well, or this is more about more like a casual conversation between you and I?
Depends on how the conversation goes.
It's just I was just looking online because I want to be accurate if we publish this. So I want to make sure that I'm actually giving you the right information. Okay, all right. Yeah, now I think I'm good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can give you the right information for sure now.
Okay. So the property I'm trying to determine is the glass transition temperature of a network that I've made a bajillion times by hand, and I know the temperature that it should be. But now I want to have a computer tell me what it thinks the temperature should be and see that it's going to be the same. Based on what this conversation so far, all I can think to do is I would go on Google, look up open source programs for computational modeling and research, teach myself how to use one, and that's all I got, right? I don't know what the interface is like, what information it's going to be asking me for to get this specific property. How you help me fill that in? What would you do? What would you tell me to do?
Yeah. So we mentioned before how you can quote unquote synthesize your material on your computer for your model, right? So now let's say, Jacob, you've already built this polymer network in your model, right? And you give it the information about the chemical structure. So the computer knows what kind of interactions between different atoms, different beads are going on in your system. So basically, if you want to measure the glass transition temperature of your material, what you would do in your simulation is you would increase the temperature. You would have a range of temperature values, and then at different temperature values, you would also measure the density of your system. And essentially, with increasing temperature, what we would see is there will be two regimes, different. The overall trend of the density with increasing temperature is it's gonna decrease, and then there's gonna be a point, a temperature value that would basically marks the separation of the two regimes, and that will be your glass transition temperature.
So that point would be the intersection of those two slopes, and that's my TG.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
And I assume if you change some of the details in your polymer networks, say the cross-link density, or like if you add some functional groups here and there, or like how flexible or like how flexible your polymer chains are, that would affect your TG, right? And then you can basically run the simulations following the same procedure, and it'll tell you how the glass transition temperature changes with whatever the parameters change, the parameters that we just talked about.
Now, a question that keeps popping up for me is, what does synthesizing our network look like for doing it on the computer, right? Because right now, all I can envision is, say, opening up ChemDraw, drawing whatever structures I need, and then somehow pass it along to the other bit of software. What is that? How it's done?
It pretty much. I mean, there are softwares like Avogadro where you can draw the chemical structures, and then you can pass on that model into your MD simulations.
Okay, so it really is. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to drawing up structures, right? I'm not typing in a code that represents benzene.
You can do that. You can also do that.
Okay.
But those are just like two different ways to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You can do it with the help of some softwares that has more user-friendly interface. And you can also do it the quote-unquote hardcore way, where you would write a code to generate the data file that you would need as the input.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. There are endless questions for people like me who don't really have any experience with this.
Yeah, but that's great. I hope that helped a little bit.
100%. Yeah,
That's great.
Now I kind of I can't wait to get that paper.
Heck yeah, that's great.
I have one. There's a couple I wrote. Really, I just want to ask one of these before, because we want to talk a bit about Hattiesburg and comedy. But my last question for now on computational modeling and research is, what are the limitations that we have that we just can't get by yet?
Yeah, I mean, there are still a lot of limitations, right? If it's this perfect thing, we don't need to do any experiments anymore. So some of the limitations are, for example, the first one is it's depending on how much atomistic details you want to get into. And sometimes people even want to take into account like some quantum mechanics effect. So there's going to be very computational, expensive, very time consuming to just like do one calculation. That's just the computing resource limitation in that sense. And different ways to like sort of get around this is to coarse graining your model. So that way you can model longer chains and a larger number of chains. So that's one limitation. But then with the coarse grain modeling, because you lost some atomistic details, it doesn't give you very precise predictions. So there's going to be that trade-off between precision and the computation expense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one limitation. And the other one comes from the coarse grain modeling, where it's not 100% precise. So a lot of times you can't expect your simulation results to match the exact value that you would measure from experiments. For example, it's going to be very challenging to get the exact glass transition temperature just from simulation alone.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people get is more of a qualitative match between simulation and experiments rather than a quantitative match. So for example, it's simulations would be able to give you the right trend. Let's just use your question as an example here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like for the glass transition temperature, even though simulations might not be able to give you the exact TG values, but it'll tell you how, by changing some of the compositional parameters of your polymer network, will change its TG values.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Where if in this polymer network, if we know by experiments that adding component B and C will increase TG, then we do the same thing in the simulation. It might not increase by the same number, but we'll still see these increases.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. That's amazing. And again, I feel like we can keep talking about this forever, but our limitations are time and content. We want to talk about Hattiesburg and being in comedy. I forgot to mention this in the beginning. Dr. Bo's a stand-up comedian. The first time that I ever saw Dr. Bo, she was on stage. I didn't know that she had just interviewed for USM, and my stomach hurt laughing. I think I talked to you about this when I first met you at the brewery. I felt like a fangirl when I met you. I was like, oh my God, there's Bo. I was dying of laughter. It was like you came out first talking about how you had gone hiking, and immediately you were like, which is weird, right? We're in Hattiesburg. Where did I go hiking? So,
you're too nice.
It was hilarious. So let's talk a bit about that. First, when did comedy start for you? And tell me a little bit about the comedy scene in Hattiesburg.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started doing comedy just a couple months before I graduated from Northwestern. So at that point, I was like pretty jaded with with writing my dissertation and everything, and I also knew that I was going to leave Chicago after this. So I wanted to just, sort of take advantage of what the city has to offer. And I know that Chicago has such a great comedy scene. So I took an 8-week class on stand-up comedy at the Second City. And I just ended up really loving it. And I just kept doing it, especially after I moved to Durham, North Carolina. I was doing comedy quite a lot in my free time. I would go to open mics, and later on I started getting booked on showcases during the weekends, and sometimes even some weekday nights. I would just like do comedy and hang out with my comedian friends that I got to meet through comedy, and it's been such a rewarding experience as well. And that really also. I want to bring up this other point of like the importance of having one or two hobbies outside of school, just for the sake of your mental health. It's so good. It's so helpful. And also it just like helps you become a more like well-rounded person in general.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going.
Hattiesburg comedy scene, right? So actually when I was interviewing, I was quite pleasantly surprised to find out that Hattiesburg does have a small comedy scene. The second time I visited, I actually got to open for Sean Patton, who happened to have a showcase.
I think that's
here.
The show that I was at.
Yeah. It was a really fun experience. Also, just like interacting with some of the local comedians here, and I haven't really been able to do a whole lot since I started my whole time. Since I started my full-time job here, it's been a lot. But in the near future, once I like more get the groove of everything, I want to still like ease back into comedy again, because it's just it's become a big part of my life now. Yeah.
What does getting back into it look like? Like, I imagine every comedian has some small notepad with them at all times to write. Do you have a little something to write ideas and everything?
I have my comedy notebook.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
It is true. Yeah, gotta write down those funny ideas.
So during these past few months, you mentioned you started a job as academic researcher. You're going to be a professor essentially, right?
It's a real job now.
Yeah. It takes a lot of your time.
Absolutely.
So do you find that, are you just not able to do that as much too? Is that part of not being in comedy as much as you like not even considering the ideas? Or is it more that you're still writing down a lot of stuff, you just have no time to put it together into a joke that you would tell on stage?
A little bit of both, actually, because this new job has been really keeping me really busy, and I just don't really have a whole lot of free time outside of work, or at least since I've only been here for 3 months, and there's just like so much to learn almost every single day. I mean, it's both really exciting, but also exhausting in a way, right? So I just naturally don't have that much time to like actually gather the don't have that much time and also the energy to actually go to an open mic physically. And also just I feel like I also don't have enough time to write down some bits or jokes anymore, which I mean, well, I want to answer this in a little bit different way. I also feel like I sort of, because I'm so focused on this new job, I also just limited myself to my observations, if that makes sense.
No, go elaborate on that.
Yeah, because my comedy style is a lot of like observational comedy. So I feel like because I'm so focused, like on this new job, I'm learning everything to get the job done. I don't pay enough attention outside of work, at least in the past 3 months, and that's something I wanna work on, and I wanna change a little bit, just to pay more attention when I go places. The thing is, I don't go to enough places outside of work. I mean, I still go grocery shopping, which is great. I'm still surviving, right? And I did notice this one time when I went to Sam's Club, I saw this so bizarre thing that just so mind-blowing to someone like me, first time living in the Deep South, which was
someone had a gun.
No.
That was the weird thing that continued.
Fortunately, no, not that. But that'll be also very shocking. But what I saw at Sam's Club that day was pickled pig feet.
Oh, gross. Maybe it sounds gross.
And pickled sausage. And I was just like, I was so shocked by that. I was like, who would eat that? And it's like just as if like the sodium in sausage is not enough to kill you. Like, hey, let's pickle them. let's triple the sodium content.
Ooh,
and like the color is so gross as well. It's pink.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Why is this a thing?
Maybe we shouldn't be sharing this.
If anyone is listening and you eat these, I'm sorry, we don't mean to yuck your yum, but tell us what's up with that. Why is that a yum in the first place?
And you know what? It's pickle. It's what is it called? What does it say on the package? It's something like pickled snacks or something. I was like, wow, that's actually a snack? That's what people snack on? I thought I knew what snacks were, but no, apparently not.
Not down here. That's something. Pickles in general, I think pickled items down here, I think are more popular than at least elsewhere, other regions in the United States. I don't know. I don't know that I've traveled enough quite to say that, but I just haven't seen it anywhere else. Like a gas station pickle is a common road snack for folks I've met down here.
I mean, hey, like I have no problem with pickles, right? Like, I mean, I just
sure, if it was just a regular pickle, that's fine. Okay.
Actually, I just had some pickled Brussels sprouts and pickled okra the other day, and those were both really good.
Was this by suggestion of someone from the South?
No, okay. I went to this event and they had those.
Locally?
Yeah.
Oh, so
yeah,
it was a Southern thing then.
Yeah, it was a Southern thing, but it's good. But like pickled sausage or pig feet, that's where I draw the line. It's just not gonna happen.
That is too much.
But also because I'm vegetarian, so
okay, that also makes a difference. You're not drawing the line because of what their pickled feet and sausage. It's because you don't eat meat.
No, I feel like even if I ate meat, I still would draw the line there.
Okay, that's fair. Shoot, I had a clear question, but that was pretty hilarious, and that brought me from it. It's almost 3:30. How are you doing on time right now? Yeah.
Oh, I'm good. I don't have anything until 4.
Okay,
it's the office hour.
I'm not going to try and take the whole rest half hour or anything.
No. But I'm just having such a good time with you.
I'm glad.
This is great.
Glad. Excellent.
Loving it.
Awesome. Well then, awesome. Okay, let me try and remember.
No, we were talking about observation. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
But there and then.
But I mean, so that was sort of like the observation that I will still be able to get in through grocery shopping. But I'm just hoping that. In the near future, once I'm more like settled in, I will be able to observe a little more, pay more attention in life outside of work.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, okay, I remembered the two things. One of them, my relatable story of sort of welcome to grocery shopping in the South, and why I thought there was maybe a gun thing. No one pulled a gun or anything, but I was, trying to get milk or something. I was in the dairy section. There's another gentleman perusing through, and I see he's got a pistol on his hip, and I thought, wow, like I'm from California, that's just so foreign to me. Whatever, he's not shooting anybody, but he's picking out orange juice. I was like, oh, okay, that's your thing.
Yeah.
And again, for those listening, this is just a foreign thing to me. It was a welcome to the South moment. Never have I ever seen someone with a gun on their hip picking out orange juice.
I mean, you can do both, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly.
You can be both a tough person and a family person. Right?
Yes. Yeah. No. I'm not, folks. I just want you to know there's no commentary or opinion on guns being brought in here, and I'm currently thinking about what I'm going to delete.
Politically neutral.
Going back to the observations aspect of how that goes into comedy. Are because you haven't really had time to do things in life other than work related or surviving and getting food. When are you taking notes of things that are happening in this building, around the school, sort of, that you think will eventually end up as jokes on stage?
That's
Dangerous?
That's a very interesting way of asking. Are you gonna make fun of your colleagues later on?
That's not what I was asking.
No,
I
just
get.
kidding. Yeah. No, I'm just teasing.
I know.
But yeah. Oh, heck yeah! I make fun of my colleagues all the time. My bosses too. No, just kidding. That was me kidding.
Only to their face.
Yeah, only no. Also behind their backs. No, not true. Well, I feel like that's the thing. I feel like at least right now I'm treating this job very seriously. So I haven't really expanded my creativity in the comedy sense into work yet. I mean, I do enjoy my conversations with my colleagues and students, just like about life in general, right? Outside of work. But that's really outside of work. I feel like I've been keeping work pretty serious. But that might change in the future, but I hope in a good way. I mean, for example, I've done this before when I was in North Carolina, both at Duke and UNC Chapel Hill, this idea of integrating comedy writing into science communications. I've run like 2 different sort of like workshops at those universities before, and I'm hoping to continue doing the same thing here at USM. And I think it's just such a great way to combine these 2 worlds that I'm like, these 2 things that I'm like super passionate about. Mm-hmm. And it's a nice way to introduce something new to our students as well. So I guess not necessarily talking about like jokes about colleagues or students or work in general on stage, but more about like integrating or combining these two stuff together.
Yeah. What I was wondering if there was any opportunity that you might take to, I wasn't quite sure what to call it, like a stand-up workshop essentially. But what do these workshops look like that you're describing, where you're educating on how to combine comedy and science communications?
Yeah, well, so the workshop is actually on science communication. It's not really on stand-up comedy. It's more about trying to integrate some of the like comedy writing skills into science communication in general. Mm-hmm. My long-term vision for this is, at least once I've got my research group up and running, and as soon as we start publishing, I would love to have 1 or 2 short videos for explaining what we've done in this publication in a way, in the language that the general public, a lay person, would be able to understand, like why this project is important, what kind of impact would this generate in whatever application that we're aiming for. And then we're gonna like post those videos on our website as a good education sort of thing. And I'm hoping that through this process, our students will just like enjoy making these videos as well.
Definitely. Have you seen yet one of the first year welcome videos? Probably, I guess not.
I have not.
Oh,
no.
Man, you're in for a treat this fall.
Oh, really? It's happening?
Yeah. Every year it's a tradition.
Oh, really?
Yep. The first year class after their first year, the semester after their first year, we have a welcome back seminar, and at the end of that seminar, they'll play. There will be a couple of them will MC, and then they'll play skits, basically videos that they've recorded based on whatever has come up throughout the year. I think for one of them did a fashion show sort of, right? And then they each printed out some professor's face. Oh, that's the other thing. All of them are to essentially roast the professors.
That's perfect.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great time.
That's great. Yeah. Like right before I left the Triangle area, some of my comedian friends did this roast for me just as a send-off gift.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Are you planning on or hoping to do any I don't know, seminar stand-up, something, or maybe like grad student stand-up? Are you gonna set anything up like that? Get comedy into polymer science at USM?
Well, aside from the science communication workshop thing that we just talked about, I've actually been sort of thinking about this other idea, which I did a short test run at UNC Chapel Hill before, but it's about using storytelling as a coping mechanism dealing with rejections. Yeah, because like in academia, we're faced with rejections a whole lot of times, right? Like application for scholarship, fellowship, trying to publish a paper, and submitting a grant proposal. Like we get rejected all the time, and I feel like people don't talk about it enough. And yeah, I've been thinking about maybe starting like some sort of event where people can share with other participants in an open and safe and inclusive environment, just about their like experience dealing with rejection. And I think there's like storytelling can help figure out that narrative a lot. That could be really helpful.
Do you mean just like tell any story, sort of, or like essentially having students go through the process of building a story of their interest, or is this all related to rejection?
Well, I think talking about rejection could be a good starting point. Yeah, and then it depends on how things go and how the participants where they want to take this, right? We could start talking about other stuff as well. But then you gotta be a little careful, because you don't want this to be like sort of like a quote unquote group therapy session. I mean, it could be really therapeutic. It could be really wholesome, right? Like just uplifting each other and whatnot. But I want to start with maybe like just like creating this open and safe space where you can talk about rejections.
I just want to roast my friends.
I mean, that's great. We can do that too. And sometimes you just need to like blow off some steam, right? With
that's the best way to do it.
And we'll get you a platform to do that.
Yeah, literally speaking this time. Okay, I'm out of questions that I had thought of essentially ahead of time. Was there anything you wanted to discuss about Hattiesburg specifically?
Well, I feel like I haven't really gotten the chance to explore Hattiesburg that much yet. Hopefully that'll be changed in the near future, especially once the semester is over. So I don't have to deal with the pressure with teaching. Yeah, because teaching has been a lot just for this first semester.
Okay, then what advice do you have for students who are sort of on the fence right now? Maybe they're a first year in grad school, or they're going to go to grad school soon, and they're trying to decide, I think I want to do something with computational modeling. What advice do you have for these students to help them make that decision?
Well, definitely look into it, and just to see how powerful a lot of the computational tools are. And I mean, starting something new or learning something new can be so intimidating. I get it. I've been there, but I learned it. So can you.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Exactly.
I still, even after this conversation though, when you say look into it, try and find out how these tools have been used and how powerful they are, even that task isn't as straightforward as I would think, right? Like, again, I'm putting myself in this, honestly, in my own shoes, and I'm trying to think, all right, well, if that is my goal, to look into how powerful these are, I don't exactly know what I would search yet, right? Like, literally, again, just go on Google and type in most advanced computer simulation,
I probably wouldn't start that way. I would actually say go to Google Scholar and type in whatever materials you're working on or whatever materials you're interested in, say PMMA or polystyrene, whatnot, and type in that word, and then type in maybe a property you're interested in, like glass transition temperature we just talked about, and then type in molecular modeling, and that'll probably lead you to some papers, and you'll probably be able to dig in a little bit. And also, a lot of the publications these days, they have results from both experimental and computational sides. So you can just really read, say, one paper, and you can learn how those researchers used computational research to help their whole study, to help them interpret their experimental results and observations, and that would be a good way to start. And also, just after reading a couple of papers, you would probably get a sense of like if this is something that you would love to look into a little bit more. And I would really just encourage you to talk to more people who actually do computational research and talk to them and see how they got into this research. Like one of the first questions you asked me, right? Like how I got into computational research. I mean, actually, yesterday I was talking to our seminar speaker, Professor Rob Riggleman from University of Pennsylvania. He told me about this student of his. It was one of his first students, and this student came in with zero to very little knowledge about computational research. But after talking to Rob, he got really excited about it, and he joined his group and started doing computational work. And after he graduated, I think he's now a data scientist somewhere. And it's just, it could be like really rewarding. It's like something new that you learn, some new skills you would be able to get by the end of your PhD program, and that skill might help you open a whole lot more doors.
It definitely seems like the peers I've had who've gone through significant experience in computational, they have many doors open for them that are far removed from the specific research that they did, right? It doesn't, some of them, don't even use the same coding language anymore, sort of thing. So I can see how that branches out elsewhere. So that's really awesome to open up those opportunities.
Yeah, and especially, sorry, I cut you off.
No.
especially with more like generative AI models available now, like ChatGPT, learning these new things will only get easier. With the help of tools like ChatGPT. So I also encourage anyone who's interested in doing computational work to look into that as well.
Okay. Like talk to ChatGPT and ask how-to questions, sort of?
Basically, because it's essentially the new Google, right? So it's really, if we think about 30, 50 years ago, let's say when computers first came out, like a lot of people were worried about how computers were going to take away their jobs, but computers only took away jobs from people who didn't learn how to use computers. So the same thing goes for ChatGPT. In the future, ChatGPT will take away jobs from people who didn't learn how to use ChatGPT.
I have this big smile on my face right now because when I was home recently, my dad, he got himself in trouble using ChatGPT.
Oh no! What happened?
He asked it to write a poem for my mom, and it apparently wrote a really, really good, moving poem. And so he shared it with my mom, and it asked for information, and so it was all personalized. And she was so moved, she cried. And he didn't expect this reaction or something. So he said he was faced with this moral dilemma, and he knew he had to say something. So,
like whether he should have told her.
Well, no, I mean, the moral dilemma is like, oh my gosh, do do I not say anything and allow her to enjoy this moment?
Right.
Or do I take back the joy that I just provided? And which was the honest thing to do. And so he did that. He took some flack for sure, but it was a hilarious use of ChatGPT. It was a very him thing to do. Sorry, Dad.
That's hilarious. But at least he gave all of her information to ChatGPT, so there's still effort.
No, I won't give him that. Nope, I can't. Okay. It was not. He did it for me. It was fun. It was fun to play with ChatGPT.
Okay.
So all I have now is there anything that you would like to add, even if it's not just like some last note? If there's something, well, now it's 3:45, so just keep your time in mind. But anything you would like to add at the end here?
Well, I just want to say for current graduate students and also future graduate students, I just want to this is unsolicited advice, obviously, but I just want to emphasize on the importance of having a couple hobbies outside of school. That's just so important, because grad school is a journey. You're gonna face challenges along the way, and those hobbies are gonna get you through. And also having friends outside of school is also very, very important. Just wanna say that again.
Friends are dope.
Yes, they are.
Awesome. Dr. Bo, thank you so much for sitting down with me, and I'm glad we finally got this done. This is I'm looking forward to editing. This is going to be a good one.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacob.
Absolutely.
Seriously, I had a blast.
Awesome.
So much
I love
fun.
to hear that. Thank you. I did too.
Awesome.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to today's episode of the Polymer Science Podcast. If you have any questions for us or for Dr. Bo, please reach out at polymersciencepodcast@gmail.com. As always, thank you, and we'll see you next time.